gotten here?
The good old-fashioned kind of American enlightened self-interest, I guess would be the way to say it. I hit 300 pounds towards the end of my college studies, and I weigh about 200 pounds now. In my mid-20s, I started getting cognitive dysfunction. I would go into work at a very demanding job in Silicon Valley, and I would try and pay attention and try and do what I thought my brain should be able to do, and some days I really kind of was a zombie. I just didn't have the energy. I had food cravings, and I realized that I didn't know if I was going to be able to keep doing the work I was doing, and I was throwing all of my energy and will and effort into it and not getting the return that I expected. So then my company went public, and for a brief period, for a couple of years in my mid-20s, I was worth $6 million on paper. No joke. The typical 26-year-old dot-com millionaire, that was me. The company went bankrupt 2 years later. But in the meantime, I spent more than $250,000 over the last 15 years upgrading every system in my body that I could. I studied extensively, and for the last 10 years, I've been leading a nonprofit anti-aging group called the Silicon Valley Health Institute. And we've brought some of the world's top experts in anti-aging and wellness and health in to give lectures once a month in Palo Alto, California. So I've had the chance to talk to 100 leading researchers, and I've written a book on epigenetics, how to change the environment and change yourself so that your children can inherit healthier genes from you. And the list kind of goes on, but I ended up being a Silicon Valley career on one part of my life, and now I'm a biohacker. My blog has more than 1 million people see what I write every month. We're ranked number 23,000 of all websites on Earth because people are so interested in how they can upgrade themselves. And my podcast, Bulletproof Executive Radio, is now ranked number 1 or number 5, somewhere in the top 5, consistently on iTunes in the health category. So I've become a professional biohacker and helped a whole lot of people lose huge amounts of weight and just get their brains back.
So Dave, tell us a little bit about that. You have quite a history. So you have you say from the private brain EEG facilities hidden in Canadian forest to remote monasteries in Tibet. You have quite a story. Could you share with us a little bit about how you went from 300 pounds to 200 pounds, and you talk about not exercising to make that happen,
sure.
or not becoming a crazy exerciser. Tell us about that.
When I weighed 300 pounds, this may come as a bit of a surprise, I actually knew I was fat. So, every fat person knows they're fat. They all have a mirror, even if they don't have a scale, and none of them likes it. So everyone tries, and most people do what I did. They sit down and they think it's because I'm not trying hard enough, and then they feel like a failure, and then they try harder the next day. No one tells them that your willpower is a finite resource and you can use it up. So if you use it up all day long looking at a bagel and saying no to it over and over, you're not going to have a lot of energy left at the end of the day because you literally threw yourself against a brick wall and it didn't change anything. So for me, I work out 6 days a week, an hour and a half a day, half cardio and half weights. I was so determined to lose weight. I went on a low-calorie diet. 18 months later, I weighed 300 pounds. I was strong, but I was still covered by a layer of blubber under my skin, and I didn't lose the weight. So something wasn't right there, and I realized, wait a minute, I eat less than my thin friends, and I work out more, and I'm still losing weight. What I believe works isn't working. Something else must be happening. And I started gathering the data, and when you measure what you do, you soon realize, maybe actually the data supports that what I'm doing doesn't work. So I had a random occurrence in the early 90s. I picked up a weightlifter magazine in line somewhere. I was never really paid attention to those things. I was never a bodybuilder. And it said, sugar makes you fat, starch makes you fat. I said, well, that sounds ridiculous, but nothing else works. So I inadvertently eliminated gluten from my diet, and my personality changed over 3 months, and I lost 50 pounds. I also cut my sugar, but not entirely, just a lot, and I raised my protein. Pretty simple things by today's dieting understanding. The difficult thing, though, was that I only lost 50 pounds. The other 50 was stubborn, and then I started getting weird kind of swollen joints, and things didn't work that well. And what I'd run into was what happens on a low-carbohydrate diet if you go with a high-protein diet. It turns out high protein is hard for the liver to handle, and protein doesn't do a very good job of putting you in fat-burning mode. You need to have enough protein. You need to have high-quality protein. But the trick, really, was fat. I went through a raw vegan period where I was a raw vegan dieter and I lost some weight, but along the way I lost 25, 30 pounds, and it always came back with a vengeance. So this yo-yo dieting thing happens. I experimented with several other diets, and eventually I developed the bulletproof diet, where you eat between 50 and 70% of your calories from fats that make you thin, and you eat a moderate amount of very high-quality protein and huge amounts of vegetables. And when you do that, food cravings disappear, so you don't have to use your willpower anymore. You lose weight effortlessly. Like a half a pound a day is not uncommon, and I've had several people lose a pound a day for months on end when they needed to. And you're doing this without food cravings. It works differently for men and women. And the number one part of this is getting enough of the right kinds of fat. For me, the realization that not all fats affect the body the same way, not all proteins affect the body the same way, that's what kind of blew the doors off this food pyramid, and people say eat 30 grams of protein. Here's an idea to kind of make it clear that this is something you already know. If I were to offer you, say, if I said you need 30 grams of protein, which is a common number most people are shooting for in a meal, and then I gave you a bowl of, say, spider venom or a bowl of scrambled eggs, you would obviously eat the scrambled eggs because no one eats spider venom. But that spider venom was 30 grams of protein. It probably would have killed you if you ate that much of it, but it was protein. So we know intuitively in our gut that some protein is not equal to other protein, but at the same time, most people believe that 30 grams of gluten protein is the same effect as 30 grams of steak protein, and they just don't do the same thing to your body. So one of the mistakes I was making was trying to get a lot of protein, but not differentiating between soy protein, eggs, meat, and all the various other sources of protein. What I found was that vegetarian sources of protein are inferior to healthy animal-based sources of protein. And I make recommendations in my diet for every food category that say, here's the less inflammatory, most valuable foods, and here are the least valuable, most inflammatory foods. And then even provide an iPhone-based roadmap that measures your heart rate using the camera on your iPhone so that you can know which food you're sensitive to. And when you do this and you eliminate the broadly inflammatory foods and you eliminate the foods that are just inflammatory for you, you end up just walking around every day feeling amazing mental focus. And for me, that was what I wanted. I wanted to keep my body weight down effortlessly without thinking about it. I wanted to eat whatever I wanted to eat without experiencing cravings or just dramatic need. And I wanted laser-like mental focus all day long. And that's what I do. I work out 15 minutes a week, sometimes a little more, but usually about that much because I have a very hectic travel schedule and 2 young kids and all. And I'm pretty ripped for a 40-year-old guy who used to weigh 300 pounds and still has stretch marks from it. I'm completely happy with my body, but most of all with my ability to pay attention for as long as I want, which I did not have when I was 20.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So can you tell us, what does a bulletproof plate look like? Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What are you eating?
Well, my most common breakfast is something that's kind of become viral, you could say. It's called bulletproof coffee. It's a recipe that I made after a lot of experimenting. It has only 3 ingredients. It has coffee brewed with upgraded beans. This is a kind of coffee that I make. Most coffee has some toxins in it that increase inflammation, and it has some things that are really good for you in it. So you end up getting a mix of good and bad. During the production of coffee, I went through the process and eliminated the things that introduce the toxins. So you end up getting coffee that doesn't have the same inflammatory profile as normal coffee. We even ran a study on cognitive function of my coffee beans versus other mass market coffee and found huge differences in people's ability to do what we call executive function, a short series of cognitive tasks that measure how well your brain is working today. So you use my low inflammation coffee plus grass-fed butter. You can buy this at almost any grocery store in the U.S. Kerrygold makes one. There are a few other brands, and internationally, Anchor butter is the most widely available one, but it needs to be from cows that eat grass. The reason is that cows, when they eat grass, make really good stuff in their butter, and when you feed a cow corn and soy, their milk and the butter made from the milk contains the wrong kind of fat. It's more inflammatory. And finally, there's an extract of coconut oil I make called upgraded MCT oil. It's 6 times stronger than coconut oil. People by now have mostly heard coconut oil is good for you, but it's hard to eat 6 tablespoons of coconut oil. It's not so hard to eat 1 tablespoon of upgraded MCT oil. So with this stuff, you put a tablespoon of that in your coffee and you blend the coffee with the butter, the other flavorless coconut oil extract, and what comes out is this amazing creamy latte. And I drink that for breakfast 6 days a week, just that, no protein and no sugar. And when I do that, I don't have hunger for 6 to 8 hours. I mean, I don't pay any attention to food. My energy is so laser focused. It is amazing. I can't explain how big it is. But I don't have to, because there's 2.5 million Google search results about bulletproof coffee right now. And it's been in national magazines, it's been covered extensively, and it does exactly what I said it does. It makes your brain focus all day long, and it just frees you from food. It also, though, accomplishes something called bulletproof intermittent fasting. You might have heard of intermittent fasting as some sort of new idea around dieting, where you just don't eat for 18 hours a day, and then you can eat normal amounts of calories the rest of the day. This is profoundly good from an aging perspective. So it's an anti-aging practice. Weightlifters do it. And it's hard to do for a lot of people because you get cold and hungry right around lunchtime. And that's when most of us are at work. So I realized that if you eat just fat and coffee in the morning, you don't trigger your digestive machinery. Your liver digests fructose. It digests protein. But when you blend the fat like this, it doesn't turn on the same parts of the liver that normal protein and sugar digestion do. So your body thinks you're still fasting, and it saves a lot of energy for your brain to work. It also
if you're ketotic, so you're
it keeps you in
ketotic
ketosis
at this point. So
yeah.
Okay.
So the nighttime fast
anti-aging for the brain.
You called it. So it's anti-aging and anti-hunger. And bottom line, if you use your willpower to try and lose weight, you'll run out of willpower before you run out of fat. It's not the path to go on. You need to change your environment, change what goes into your body, so that you can lose the weight. And the anti-aging effects are like a huge benefit. But that's what I do for breakfast. For lunch, I take half a head to a full head of cauliflower, broccoli, some vegetable, and I mix it with a little bit of butter and some more of the upgraded MCT oil, because I'm trying to get my calories up to 70% from fat. So it's really creamy. I put it in a blender usually because it makes soup the fastest, and I'll add some lightly browned lamb or grass-fed beef to it, or if I'm in a hurry, I'll use collagen protein. And that way it's like a bone broth soup, thick and creamy and vegetable, like cream of broccoli, cream of asparagus, and it satisfies for hours. And dinner is usually meat with a lot of vegetables and sometimes a starch. In this case, low inflammation starches from the Bulletproof Diet infographic. Sweet potatoes, white rice, not brown rice, and no other grains.
Can you go over that rice again? You said white rice?
I did.
Oh, we can't skip over that one, Dave.
The original Bulletproof diet from a few years ago when I was developing this had brown rice out of white rice because of the old kind of belief. It has fiber. Fiber is good. Oh, and there's some vitamins in the rice hull. It turns out the way to think about food has 3 steps, and you have to do the steps in the right order or it doesn't work. And what you do is you look first at, does it have the right kind of protein or starch or fat? And rice actually does have some of the right kinds of starch in it when you're trying to consume starch. So rice passes that one. And the next thing you look at, though, is does it contain anti-nutrients? These are man-made anti-nutrients or toxins, or naturally occurring toxins, or toxins that form during storage and processing. And if it has those, don't eat it. And then the third thing is, does it have micronutrients? What the people who made the brown rice recommendations in the early 80s did is they ignored the middle step about anti-nutrients. They didn't understand that the type of fiber in the husk of brown rice is irritating to the gut, and that it contains anti-nutrients that binds to the minerals in your body so you can't absorb them. It's mostly called phytic acid, and there are actually several other anti-nutrients in the outer part of the grain. What every culture throughout history has known is that if you can afford it, get rid of the toxic part of the rice. If you are so poor that you cannot afford to eat polished rice, then eat the brown rice. It's the most extreme poverty food, and it'll keep you alive, but it won't do everything that white rice will do, because your body has to go to the work of dealing with the toxins. And this is very natural. If you are a grain of rice, your job is to reproduce, not be food. So to keep yourself from being eaten by animals, or mold, or bacteria, you develop natural pesticide and you cover yourself in it so that your seeds can last till the next season and then they can germinate. Well, the process of cooking foods, or in this case, processing the rice by polishing off the outer layers, remove the toxins. But if we leave the toxins in place, then our bodies have to do that work. And asking our bodies to do that work for brown rice isn't doing us any favors. There is no benefit to brown rice over white rice, but it does cause digestive distress and discomfort and potentially even damage to the lining of the gut, depending on who you are and your own health status. So I don't recommend brown rice. I'd eat it if I was starving. I would eat it on an occasional basis because it's not that big of a deal. But if I get to pick between white and brown, I'll pick the white. Plus, it tastes better.
So it metabolizes a lot faster than brown rice because you've removed a lot of the fiber, right? But how does that compare to sprouting the brown rice? So if you soak it overnight to remove the phytic acid, how does that compare to white rice?
Now, this is getting into the very cool sort of raw vegan types of questions, stuff that I did. I could have written a raw vegan cookbook if I wanted to. I just spent 2 hours a day for a long period of time in the kitchen sprouting and all that. If you do eat rice, or especially legumes, I highly recommend that you do go to the trouble of sprouting them. So you soak them and you let them start sprouting. And I'm less concerned about brown rice if you sprout it. However, you can remove the phytic acid, but the fiber in the outside of the rice may still be unhealthy for your gut. It depends on your genetics. It depends on your background growing up, like how healthy were you, how healthy is your gut. If you have gut problems, you have a history of Crohn's or colitis, I would definitely steer clear of the brown rice. It is not a great choice even then. However, sprouting is definitely the way to go if you're going to eat it. There is a risk of sprouting, though. If you're listening to this and you've done sprouting, you know that sometimes you get those little fuzzy things growing in your sprouting. If you're sprouting and you end up developing a mold problem, which I had a very hard time stopping this from happening when I did sprouting, you need to throw all of it away. And a lot of the commercial sprouted brown rice has fungal toxins in it. I just tested a batch of sprouted brown rice that I got from Costco. I said, oh wow, they actually sprout it, then they dry it. This is such a neat idea. Like, I'm willing to try this out and see.
Right.
You know what? it had mold toxins in it. I didn't laboratory test that one. I am a guinea pig. I've lived in 2 houses with Stachybotrys, one of the most toxic molds. And when I'm exposed to them, I feel it within minutes, and it's very specific. It's very specific in my body. I get like gut pain, and my forehead swells up, and my joints hurt, and it's really unpleasant. So I'm kind of, it's like my kryptonite. So I had 1 serving of that stuff, and was like, oh my goodness, it's gonna time to get the activated charcoal and get rid of these toxins. So it was a problem. So you can do it, but I'm not sure why you would. I mean, you only have so many hours in a day. It takes time and energy to sprout the brown rice, and what you're getting after you sprout it is still not as good for you as just the white rice. Rice is not a source of nutrients. It never was. It's a source of starch. That's it. You can get nutrients from liver at about 1,000 times more density than you can from rice. So look to an egg yolk, look to liver, look to green vegetables for the antioxidants, but the little bit that you're getting from the outer layer of the brown rice, it's not worth it. And most of history, societies have known this.
Yeah. No, I think my goal with rice is to soak up the sauce. But so tell me something, David.
Rice is a great butter absorber. If you want to slow down that white rice problem, add butter, add protein, and butter in rice makes the rice absorb much more slowly. So it's not a high glycemic food the way it is if you eat it on an empty stomach, just plain white rice.
And again, when you're talking about butter, we're referring to grass-fed cow.
Very specifically. Or even coconut oil works, but you're better off to go with butter, in my opinion, or ghee.
Okay, yeah. 2 of my favorite Belgian lubricants, by the way. Okay. And so, great question for you. I always like to quote the old traditional, very Middle Eastern statement, breakfast like a king, lunch like a nobleman, dinner like a pauper. So you kind of flip this in that. And so most of the ketotics, brain healthy programs are real light dinner versus the breakfast. So what was your rationale for doing this? Is it lifestyle? Is it?
There's definitely a lifestyle component. Dinner is traditionally the biggest meal of the day. And there are studies of intermittent fasting that look at, does it really matter which 18 hours you don't eat? And the ones that I'm familiar with show that it doesn't really matter. You can go either way. But I also spend a lot of my time and energy looking at sleep quality, because if you don't get high quality sleep, even if you don't get that many hours, as long as they're super high quality, it can be okay. Well, then you're not going to get the benefits of your dieting program. So going to bed on an empty stomach does not improve sleep. Your glucose drops. Your brain likes to have glucose during sleep. So I find that people sleep better when they eat a dinner. And in fact, for some clients, even a little bit of raw honey before bed in order to pump up the liver glycogen so that they have more brain fuel. Also, if you're using the upgraded MCT oil, you get another source of brain fuel there. So people have more serotonin for their sleep as well if they eat dinner and they have a little bit of starch with dinner. So the idea of eating breakfast like a king, I mean, it's a Middle Eastern proverb, but I'm assuming the Middle Eastern guys didn't have mass spectrometers, centrifuges, microscopes, and epidemiology, and some of the other things that we have now that have informed what we're doing. Because when you eat a big breakfast, you're going to get tired. All the blood drains out of your brain, and it goes into your liver and your stomach, and it starts working on digesting that, breaking down the proteins, breaking down the carbs, and using the fats. So what if instead you freed your brain to do what you wanted to do during the first 2/3 of the day, and then you decided you were going to eat? If you do it that way, you end up with a ton more energy. And I get emails every day from people saying, I can't believe I just had the day I had. Lunch came and went and I didn't even notice. I wasn't hungry. I have all this focus. I feel free. And eating breakfast will sabotage that. You eat breakfast, you're going to want a snack at 10:30. You're going to be jonesing for lunch, and you kind of put yourself on that up-down kind of treadmill. For people who are significantly overweight, and particularly women, eating nothing for breakfast is really a challenge, and it can work wonders, but it doesn't always. For people who are in that condition, which means they're usually leptin resistant, one thing that I do recommend is that when you're drinking a breakfast like bulletproof coffee, butter, and this upgraded MCT oil that pushes you into ketosis very quickly, you can add 30 grams of low inflammation protein in the morning. And the least inflammation protein I know of is hydrolyzed collagen, which is upgraded collagen. I make mine from grass-fed cows. And when you use upgraded collagen, you're getting your protein in the morning, but it's already pre-digested by enzymes before you take it, so your body can take advantage of the collagen peptides that are in the collagen without a huge burden. I find that I'm hungry an hour and a half earlier when I add protein in the morning, but I still don't get any cravings all morning because I didn't add any sugar, I didn't add any fructose, I didn't add any other burned egg whites or anything like that, which you might get if you're doing, fried eggs in hot oil or something. It turns out managing the toxins that go into your body lets you manage your cravings. So for people who are really obese, if bulletproof intermittent fasting without protein in the morning doesn't work, oftentimes 30 to 60 days of adding 30 grams of protein in the morning can help. It's very individualized at that point, but the good thing is it's pretty harmless to try both and see which one works better for you. Neither of them is dangerous or extreme.
Dave, the title of your talk is Bulletproof Youthfulness. How does butter make you sexier, smarter, and younger? So I love that title because so many of the people that Dr. Ann and I work with actually are afraid to eat butter. Can you talk to us about butter?
I totally can. I like to talk about butter's secret powers.
Oh, I love it.
And when you're talking butter from grass-fed, it's a different animal. Literally, cows that eat grass, feces, and the cows that are bred to eat grain. And the butter they make contains something called conjugated linoleic acid, which is tied to weight loss and actually several other health benefits in the body, including a reduction in cancer. So getting more CLA in your diet is a great idea, and the only way you get it is by eating cows that ate natural cow food, which is not what happens in most butter you buy at the store. Most butter is not really the butter our ancestors ate or even our grandparents ate. It is something else. Now, in fact, I have an infographic on the site about butter that summarizes a lot of the different things that butter does. But the other thing, and the reason that I include butter in this recipe for bulletproof coffee, is that butter contains butyrate. It's called butyric acid, and it sounds a bit like butter because the name for butyric acid came from butter. About 5% of grass-fed cultured butter is this precious short-chain fat. Butyrate has, and there's studies that back this up, it has anti-inflammatory properties, particularly in the brain. And it does this by inhibiting something called NF-kappa beta. And it's okay if you don't memorize that, but there are different studies that show the mechanisms that it uses to reduce inflammation. And it heals the gut. You must have butyric acid to keep your gut healthy. And there's two sources of butyric acid. One comes from fermented dairy, like butter. The other comes from gut bacteria. If you are lucky enough to have the right species of gut bacteria in your gut that makes butyric acid. In my experience, a ton of people don't have that anymore because of antibiotics, because of changes in the soil and the planet, and other things like that. So adding this fat to your breakfast can really help gut health, believe it or not. But it gets a little bit better. So those studies I mentioned are only in humans. But when you look at what happens in mice and rats when you give them butyrate, it protects them against mental illness in another study. It increases energy expenditure and improves body composition. Now, if you want anti-aging and suddenly you got more energy and you got thinner from eating butter, which is the #1 source of butyrate, that's kind of cool. it also, in a different study, reduces the negative effects of type 1 diabetes. Now, most people who have diabetes listening to this probably have type 2, but it's very interesting that butter has a protective effect in type 1. And another study shows butter reduces intestinal permeability. So when someone says butter is bad for you because it has cholesterol, well, I just named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 studies that disagree with that statement. In fact, butter, and you need to differentiate grass-fed butter versus regular butter, but grass-fed butter, in my mind, is a superfood, and it's something that I'm not alone on. People who drink bulletproof coffee have noticed the benefits so dramatically that earlier this year we sold out of grass-fed butter in the U.S. Kerrygold, the #1 supplier of Irish grass-fed butter, ran out of butter in the U.S. because so many people were buying it to put it in their coffee because it changes your whole entire day. These are the secret reasons that butter works. And when someone says, oh, it's bad cholesterol, your liver makes cholesterol. There's a reason your liver makes cholesterol, and if you don't eat cholesterol, your liver will make it. So eating a little bit of cholesterol in butter isn't going to hurt you. In fact, eating a lot of it in undamaged butter isn't going to hurt you either.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You know, one of the things that I love about your message is the healthy fats. Is being able to really incorporate that. Many of our listeners are, grew up in the era I did. If they're in the perimenopause, menopausal, or post at this point, we were growing up with the fat-free fad.
I bet your menopause, I'm so sorry to talk over you. I bet your menopause was more painful because of the low fat, right?
Well, I think that what I've noted from my patients who experience that, surely, all our hormones are derived from fats, and that's a big thing to really promote healthy fats and get those back into our diet. So I think that's really, really important. And that's for all of our listeners. Healthy fats are crucially important. It protects the brain. You've heard me talk more than once about cholesterol being, the precursor to all hormones. So healthy levels of cholesterol are protective for cognition, for our hormones, for our youthfulness, for our sexiness. Just name it. We like healthy levels of cholesterol. And so it's got to be the right kind, like the right kind of fat. Now, what about people who have dairy allergies? What should they, what can they do instead of the butter? Do you want them to do the MCT oil? What's your recommendations there?
Many people with dairy allergies don't know if they're allergic to lactose or if they're really lactose intolerant, or they're allergic to the protein in butter. So you want to figure out which it is, because if your sensitivity is lactose, you may find that grass-fed butter doesn't bother you. If your sensitivity is protein, you may find there's a level of protein that is okay for you. So you can try butter. A lot of people like me who do not tolerate milk or cheese tolerate cultured butter just fine, because the culturing process helps to break down some of the casein peptides. There's almost no casein in there, but there is a little bit. So if you still find that you don't tolerate butter, then you switch to ghee made from grass-fed butter. Ghee removes the protein and removes some of the polyunsaturated oils. There's very little in there anyway, but that process of making into ghee removes some of those. I've known 4 people who didn't tolerate ghee because they were so incredibly sensitive. And for those people, I recommend a butyric acid supplement and using a mixture of upgraded MCT oil, or better yet, brain octane, which is an even more pure, more concentrated, 18-to-1 concentrate of coconut oil. And using one of those mixed with more coconut oil or cocoa butter. And you get a really nice flavor that way. But it is really hard to get enough of the right kinds of saturated fat if you don't get dairy fat.
Yeah, thank you for that. Great point. So what are some of the other things for that sharpness and focus that you advocate in creating that really beautiful, brilliant, youthful mindset?
One of the other things that really makes a difference is just not eating gluten. Gluten breaks down in the gut. Gluten is the protein in wheat, in flour. It breaks down in the gut into something called gluteomorphin in many people. And you eat it, and it goes in and it activates the opiate receptors in your brain. And it makes you want more of it, that's for sure. You eat it, and the next day you want more and more. It does affect your ability to focus and pay attention. In fact, I was interviewing Dr. William Davis, the author of Wheat Belly, who's a leading cardiologist, just a very well-credentialed, amazing guy with a huge background in looking at cardiovascular risk. And it's funny, his first book was Track Your Plaque, about heart plaque, and his second book was called Wheat Belly, and it's all about what gluten does, not just to the gut, but to the brain. And in my podcast with him, we talked about the amazing difference in mental clarity that comes from not eating wheat. I wish it wasn't true. I like waffles and croissants as much as the next guy, but it is not worth the cost I pay cognitively or around the waist to eat gluten. It's not a part of my life anymore.
Very good. Yeah, excellent point. A lot of the things, sometimes it's the things we avoid versus the things we take in. So, beautiful. And sugar, I'm sure, is among those things as well.
Yeah, limiting sugar is really important. Having sugar in the morning is going to set you up to be bouncing all day long. But here's the other thing. Even worse than sugar is fruit in the morning. And a lot of people say, well, it has fiber, it must be good. Well, you can get fiber from lots of places. And if you wanted fiber in the morning, why aren't you eating broccoli, which has more fiber than fruit anyway? And what fructose in fruit does is it goes to the liver and it becomes triglyceride, and it has to be processed by the liver. So fructose will make you crave sugar. And your body wants sugar, specifically the glucose half of table sugar, in order to have more mitochondrial energy to process the fructose, to get it out of there, because fructose damages the lining of the arteries. It causes fatty liver disease. It contributes to gout. Like, it's not good for you. So I've learned that fruit is pretty much a bag of sugar water. It's candy. And it has a few vitamins in it if it was fresh picked, which your fruit probably wasn't. And fruit juice is pretty much high fructose corn syrup version 2.0. So what I recommend people do, and I map this out on the Bulletproof Diet infographic, is I map out what are the low fructose fruits. Eat more blueberries, eat more raspberries, which have less fructose than blueberries. Focus on the flavor of the fruit. Use lemon and lime and things like that in other ways. If you want to do a smoothie in the morning, you can squeeze a lime in it and you get a fruity taste without a ton of fructose. My recommendation is that you keep your fructose to less than 25 grams per day from all sources, which isn't that much. But when you do that, the anti-aging effects are very clear, and you will notice it in your mental focus as well. During summer, at the height of fruit season, yeah, have some more. If there's fresh peaches that grow on the tree in the backyard, we evolved to get more fructose for a 6-week period in the summer, and you'll put on fat like all animals do when you eat fructose. It's all right. You get a little bit chunkier during summer. If you're eating like an animal, like a human evolved to eat, during winter you would be eating no fructose and less starch, and you would lean back down. So I'm not afraid of fruit. I'm willing to eat fruit for a brief period each year. Right now it's summer in British Columbia, and yeah, I eat the good stuff, but I eat it in the evening. I don't eat it all day long, and I never eat it for breakfast because I don't want to have cravings all day long.
You know, it was great when Dave and I were at JJ's Mastermind a couple weeks ago. I got to be the Bulletproof Coffee Girl and learn how to make his very special coffee and then pick his brain a little bit. And I remember, Dave, you came up to me, I think it was after lunch. It was for the afternoon session, and you said, "Is there any more butter?" And I said, well, I'm not sure. I said, I think that I think that we ran out for the day. I can't remember if it was the second day or not. And I said, why are you looking for butter? And you said, because I missed lunch. And I was so curious about that. I said, don't you eat food? And you said, well, sometimes, and if there's the right food available, I'll eat it. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was so cool. And by the way, when I'm waiting for my MCT oil, I can't wait to get it because I really liked how I felt. I can't do the caffeinated coffee, so Dave has a really awesome decaf that is made with his very special beans that are toxin-free, and he kind of cringed when I asked him if he had decaf.
Here's the story behind decaf. Throughout the history of the coffee business, they've always taken the very lowest quality beans. And low quality means that they have been damaged by insects or by fungus. These are the ones that don't taste so good. And they take those and send them off for decaffeination using either very toxic solvents or using a newer Swiss water process that uses less toxins. Now, if you're using beans that have a lot of toxins and sending them off to be decaffeinated and you get them back, they're going to have toxins. And even worse, the caffeine is protective against mold growth in coffee. So if there's a humidity problem in the storage of your decaf coffee, you can introduce even more problems. So I've never been able to have a commercial decaf without feeling sore joints and a headache afterwards because I'm a delicate flower when it comes to these mold toxins. So I finally went to the trouble and I took my special process, upgraded bulletproof process coffee, and sent it off to the Swiss water process facility. There's only one on Earth. It turns out it's in Vancouver, and I roast my coffee in Portland. So I have the coffee shipped to Vancouver, and then in a 2-week cycle have it sent back and roasted so that it doesn't sit for a long time without caffeine in the green coffee. And that is the lowest toxin decaf coffee on Earth, but it still doesn't taste as good as real coffee, and real coffee has real benefits for people. So I'm a huge fan of at least 1 cup of normal coffee in the morning for people who can handle it. And it turns out that my coffee has around 30 to 40% as much caffeine as one of the other mass market coffee brands that I picked at random and sent into my lab to get tested. So it's not a high caffeine coffee. It turns out the higher caffeine coffees make more caffeine because the plants are stressed by something in the environment, either an infestation of animals or a lack of nutrients in the soil or an insect or a fungal or bacterial problem in the coffee plant itself, like in the coffee bush or tree. So the healthy coffee plantations make healthier coffee, and I went through and redefined some of the coffee practices to make for a healthier coffee to come out.
I think that's a good point. I was thinking, you're making me think about the time when I lived on a coffee plantation in the interior of Brazil for a month, and just watching the beans grow and just how beautiful and natural, what a great environment it is, and being in that and living there and just feeling the beautiful antioxidant effects of the coffee. Just bringing all that back to me. I will never deny anyone their 1 cup of coffee a day for sure. And I think one thing I think it's so particularly important and impressive from what I gather is part of your journey is one of the things that's been a challenge for you is the genetic susceptibility that you probably are positive for this mold toxicity, and how healthy fats in a ketotic diet is really neuroprotective there. So through your genetic makeup, so your life experiences, like so many of our experts bring into our individual, personal, and professional experience into practice, creating programs that work for you and have broad spread benefits to other people. So, I love that you're sharing and that you've come to this point and totally, been an inspiration for so many people.
Thank you so much. That's a great compliment. It's occurred to me that some people say, well, Dave, obviously you're more sensitive to mold toxins than other people. And yeah, 28% of sensitivity. We do, and 28% of people have the same genes I do that say if they breathe the right toxic mold spores, it'll turn on inflammation in the nervous system that won't turn off, period. The fact that I'm unfortunate to have grown up in a house that had toxic molds behind the paneling in my bedroom with nosebleeds 5 or 10 times a day and constant inflammation and asthma and all these things that are perfectly correlated with the presence of mold there, now that we know, that did set me up to be kind of a delicate flower, to be perfectly honest. That said, I'm pretty bulletproof. I flew 150 times last year. I was in Asia for 2 weeks doing meetings for 10 hours a day, and flew back and was in a TV studio 3 days later. And I can hit it really hard, and I don't get sick, and I don't lose my focus, and I don't even get disabled by tiredness. I can bring it whenever I need to bring it. And I'm 40, and I sleep 4 or 5 hours a night very frequently, because with family and work and all, that's just what happens. So I couldn't do that when I was 20. I'm so grateful that I've learned all the tricks, partly because I can feel what works, and then I can go to my laboratory and I can test it and see what works. And that's also a pretty unusual thing to be able to do. So using data, not just does it feel good, but getting the data, understanding the science, and putting it all together. And I put all this online for free because I realized I didn't come with an instruction manual when I was born, and no one else did either. And if I'd have known the stuff that I've learned through kind of blood, sweat, and tears, if I'd have just known that when I was 16, my life would have been so different. I would have known what to do if suddenly my brain got all foggy, or suddenly I started gaining weight and something was making me inflamed. How do I manage that? I wouldn't have weighed 300 pounds. I would have had a much better brain all throughout college. I would have been able to pay attention without basically burning out my willpower and still not paying attention very well. So I would have led a different life, and my goal in the Bulletproof Executive is to share the knowledge so that people have the tools, and to filter the knowledge from all these experts and to make it accessible. So people who don't want to be biohackers, but people who just want to feel good all the time and have limitless energy, have a set of tools to use to do it. And if they choose to use them or not, that's their call, but at least the info is out there now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing it. And what about also, because mold toxicity, we live in Southeast Georgia, and we've dealt with mold toxicity in my home, my office, and learned way too much about it because one of my staff members was genetically susceptible also, and, we've, become an expert in this area of mold toxicity and neurotoxicity, and addressing it as well as eliminating it from the household. And I think it's so important that, addressing some of the symptoms that you've had related to that. Could you share some of that with us? Because so many listeners, it's that client that's going to doctor after doctor after doctor saying, hey, I know something's wrong with me, something's wrong, and it may be in their work environment, it may be in their home environment, that this exposure is creating, bio-death, actually. So can you just go into that a little bit?
Sure. It sounds a little alarmist. Really, how can this be? Even in the Bible, if you go way back, there's a passage that talks about if black mold appears, burn the house, and I'm sure I'm misquoting it terribly. But we've known that certain black molds are bad for people for a long time. The problem is that the things we've done to our soil and the use of antifungal soil compounds in agricultural, one called Denamil, designed by DuPont, caused huge mutation in the fungal biome of our planet. At the same time, spraying Roundup on everything, which has become the standard way of raising corn and soy by these industrial farming companies, also increases the toxins that mold makes by 500 times. So, on top of that, we've built houses out of cheaper and cheaper materials, where a little bit of water or a humidity problem happens, and mold starts growing on the wood. And what's growing on that wood is not a nice, little white fuzz. It is black mold that produces toxins to protect itself. All molds do this, and their goal is to say, this is my wood, no other toxins may eat this. But when a fungus grows with no other fungus opposing it, it just grows out of control, and it makes tons of toxins. And this is what's happening in homes today. You get a leak. In my case, we had a leak behind the dishwasher and didn't even know it. So when the dishwasher got taken out and replaced with a new one, the repair guy said, it looks like it's a little damp back there, so I kind of soaked it up and put the new dishwasher in. And that night, I felt like I was drunk. The next morning, I was hungover. I could not make my brain go, and I started getting bloated. My dog stopped eating. Literally, both dogs wasted down to almost nothing. It took me 2 weeks to figure out what happened. But in that 2 weeks, both my wife, Dr. Lana, and I really were just disabled. And it took about 3 months before all the inflammation parts went away. And that only happened because, I have access to unusual tools. I gave a talk about this. The video is on my YouTube channel for the Bulletproof Executive, and it's about mycotoxins, and I talk about my detox protocol. And there's 3 big things that I use to help toxins leave the body. One of them is upgraded coconut charcoal. This is a high-purity activated charcoal product, and when you use upgraded coconut charcoal, you just take a capsule or many capsules of it, depending, and it goes into the gut, and it helps to bind toxins in the gut, but it also sticks to your bile, and mold toxins recirculate in the bile in the body. So you're helping the body to excrete bile, so it has to make new, fresh bile. It's kind of like an oil change in the body, is the way I explain that. And then I also use glutathione. In fact, I just literally now came out with a new glutathione that absorbs many times better than the old stuff. It's called glutathione Force, and glutathione is a major detoxifier in the body. And you take a little bit of it, and literally, I've felt my brain fog just dissipate right after I take it, like within 5 minutes. And that's because your liver uses glutathione in order to help remove mold toxins. And then you address the core inflammation causes there. And I'd refer people to Richie Shoemaker's work on what to do with mold or even Lyme disease. But these short-term fixes of activated charcoal in the form of upgraded coconut charcoal and glutathione Force are these are meaningful things that can help you feel good. And on top of that, this is going to be shocking, when you have toxic mold and you're feeling brain fog all the time, a cup of low-toxin coffee in the morning can transform your day. I'm not even kidding. If you drink coffee all day long, you're going to burn your adrenals out. If you drink low-toxin coffee all day long, you won't want nearly as much of it, and you're much less likely to cause the adrenal stress that comes from drinking toxic coffee. But in any case, if you're foggy, Bulletproof coffee in the morning made right with grass-fed butter, upgraded MCT oil, or better yet, if you have brain fog, try Brain Octane, which is that 18X extract of coconut oil. And the beans themselves, your brain will feel better and you'll get your morning back. I kid you not. This has been something that I use myself, and I am a very sensitive to mold kind of guy.
Well, Dave, this has been amazing information today, and some rather controversial information. So it's just what we're looking for on this telesummit. Things that really challenge the status quo. So I'm excited for your information to get out there and get people thinking. It's really awesome. So we're kind of running out of time, but I wanted to make sure that we have time to go over your very special offer for our Sexy Younger You community. We wanted to have you describe a little bit in more detail what you and your team have put together for our community. You have given us the early release of the Bulletproof Diet infographic from your upcoming book, Bulletproof Diet Book. Can you tell us a little bit about the infographic?
Oh, yeah. I would encourage people to sign up at bulletproofdietbook.com to get the first chapter of the book for free as well. This book is coming out near the beginning of the year, coming up in 2014, and it is a compendium of bulletproof diet recommendations, why it works, how it works, and the core of this diet is the roadmap. The thing that has all the information boiled down as much as possible is this single-page infographic you can print out and put on your refrigerator that'll tell you when to eat what, and it'll tell you which foods are more inflammatory and which are less inflammatory. So it is basically the roadmap, and you can choose where you walk on this roadmap, but now you know what each food is going to do to your body.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. It'll probably tie together a lot of what you talked about today.
Most definitely.
Yeah, and then also the exclusive unreleased video of your presentation from the first annual biohacking conference.
Yes. Earlier in 2013, we put on the first ever biohacking conference. It was an amazing event where we brought about 100 people together, and it was actually $2,000 to go because we were doing hands-on biohacking, where we literally hooked electrodes up to people and we used the electricity to train their nervous systems. But I gave a talk there that hasn't been published yet, so this will be a chance for you to get a look at the talk from the first annual biohacking conference, and it would have cost you $2,000 to see it there live.
That's excellent. And then also you have an ebook, Beyond Supplements, A Sexier You from the Inside Out.
Yeah, in this ebook, we look at what supplements can do. So what can you do beyond the normal supplements, and what can you do just with food and other things in order to make a sexier you? So this is a set of techniques that come out of this notion that you can hack your own body by changing the environment around you or changing the way you respond to your environment.
Excellent. And then this is, let's see, you also have the ebook, which is Upgraded Chef, along with an exclusive coupon for 10% off anything on upgradedself.com. The coupon that you have set up is a very special coupon just for our community. Tell us about Upgraded Chef.
Upgraded Chef is a cookbook like no other I've ever seen. It's not one about just pictures of pretty food, although there are some food pictures in it. It's about teaching you some core techniques to cook food that is less inflammatory, that causes less food cravings. A lot of recipes out there unintentionally make food that makes you more hungry. This is how to make food that doesn't make you inflamed and is more satisfying. So we literally tell you to rethink the way you approach the act of cooking. And we provide some core recipes that you can change with infinite variety. So you just learn the techniques in the book, and then you have a new tool set in the kitchen, and you can really change the flavor of a dish but still use the same cooking technique.
That's fabulous. So altogether, this is well over a $600 value, and it's all yours for $97. So we really appreciate you and your team putting this amazing package together for our community, because you've got a lot of sexy things in this, and that's what we're all about, getting back to a sexy younger you. So awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a great journey.
Yes, thank you, Dave, very much.
You've got it. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm really, really pleased to be able to offer these things to the community.
Well, we've loved having you, and I want to thank all our listeners for being participating with us today and listening in. Please also join us on Facebook, where you can ask your questions there. And for all of you today, we are wishing you a sexy younger you.